talk about now. This is something that might not entirely be on your radar. It's about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It's a controversial bill called the Legacy Bill. This is how people are prosecuted, what happens, dealing with the past. And it's not just about Northern Ireland, it's about England, Scotland and Wales as well. It's about charges to do with the Manchester bomb, it's to do with the Birmingham Pub Bombings, it's to do with all sorts of, there's so many atrocities that were committed by the IRA and other terrorist groups, not just in Northern Ireland, but in mainland Britain as well. And Julie Hambleton was someone who was deeply, deeply affected by that. Her sister Maxine was murdered by the IRA in the 1974 Birmingham pub bombing. And she and her brother Brian Hambleton founded an organisation called the Justice for the 21 campaign group to demand the terrorists responsible for the attack are brought to justice. There's a big political issue here as well, because British soldiers for historical alleged offences, killings, have been attempted to be brought to justice as well. There have been a number of trials that have collapsed and so on. It's a complicated issue, but it's one that affects every single person in the UK. It's a matter of justice, I think, and a lot of people feeling that justice won't be done. Julie, I'm delighted, is joining me this morning. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for inviting me on and to highlight this outrageous act.
Why is it outrageous? Just tell us your story and tell us your thoughts on this, because I think there'll be a lot of people saying, well, the Troubles were a long time ago, how can we move on from this? But for you, I would imagine, thinking about Maxine this morning, it's every day for you, and it's every day for so many people who are not just victims, families, but injured people who are living with the injuries that were sustained during the Troubles. Loyalist paramilitaries, IRA paramilitaries, the state did things they shouldn't have done as well, at times as well. Just talk us through this, Julie.
Well, just to respond to those who say things like, it's a long time ago, move on. Would you say that to Holocaust victims? Would you say that to the Hillsborough families? I mean, it's actually an assault on the memory of our loved ones. Someone I have the highest regard and respect for said to me just yesterday, the passing of this legacy bill is one of the darkest days in the history of Parliament. Britain has prided itself in claiming its justice system as the finest in the world. This week, by blocking victims' families to access to the courts, has reverted us back to the Dark Ages. Now, our loved ones who were slain in cold blood have never, ever been considered as being part of the legacy conflict. But now this government is virtually ordering us, thousands of families, to get in line. This is actually an act of betrayal that we and thousands, in fact, I don't know of any family or any survivor, will ever engage in. We, our families, the Birmingham Pub Bombing families, demand now that the Home Secretary establishes a Section 1 inquiry under the Inquiries Act of 2005 that will give us an independent judge-led platform and will allow us effective participation and will guarantee no cover by way of the government's interference. This was actually offered by Boris Johnson on the eve of his election victory and the other political leaders. This is also staunchly supported by Mr. Andy Street, the West Midlands Mayor. This government have behaved in such a cavalier manner with its Machiavellian manoeuvres regarding this insidious act that to us, it feels as though our loved ones never took a breath on this earth, and it's as if they never lived. There are far more people against this bill than there are for it. It's only the Conservative politicians, and I would hazard a guess that many of the Conservatives who voted for this yesterday didn't even know what they were voting for.
Why do you think they did vote for it? Those who knew what they were voting for, why do you think they did vote for it? Do you think this issue of prosecuting soldiers, some of those soldier prosecutions have fallen apart? There have been all sorts of issues in regard to that. That's front and centre, isn't it? And it's much more about that than it is about people like you, Julie.
It's not a laughing matter. I'm laughing out of disgust. It has nothing to do with soldiers. The soldiers are being used as scapegoats. It's as simple as that. This is also successive governments can quite literally hide and bury their dirty, toxic past of collusion and complicity. this obscene act has no support from any of those who are most deserving, our families, thousands of others. The act offends the UK's obligation to human rights for all victims of the conflict. It is dangerous, it is pernicious and vicious legislation that serves no victim or survivor. It serves only the interests of politicians who want to, in essence, bury the truth forever. It is an assault on justice and the memory of our loved ones and thousands of others too.
Can you just illustrate, Julie, sorry to interrupt you, can you just illustrate for people who perhaps are maybe a bit younger, they don't really perhaps know much about the Troubles, or people who just think, you know, it was all a long time ago. From your perspective, tell us, under this legislation, and we are, as you say, a country that prides ourselves on the rule of law, if someone were to be found to have been involved in the Birmingham pub bombing, the bombing that killed your sister, what would now happen that wouldn't have happened previously, or what won't happen now that might have happened previously?
Well, for anyone who's not aware, what this act does is create a two-tier policing system, a two-tier piece of law where terrorists can kill with impunity. It's as simple as that. It's given the green light to any terrorist organisation to come to this country and kill with impunity. Because what this means is that, for instance, we have a civil case that we were preparing to bring against a certain individual. Because of this act, we won't be able to bring that case. This piece of legislation is going to quite literally revoke any kind of justice for any of the families, any of our families in Birmingham, the London Docklands, Warrington, Brighton, Harrods, the Chelsea Barracks bombing, Enniskillen, Omar, Raymond McCord's son who was killed.
There's so many. There are countless people who are affected by this.
There are just so many. Yeah. And that's what people need to remember. Don't think about this in numbers. Think about this in people and faces.
Well, I want to do that.
Just... Whether you can see this picture. This picture is my sister, Maxine. That's Maxine. That's her friend Jane Davis. They were in France.
Julie,
they were great picking too in the Champagne vineyards to improve their French for their A-levels. Both of them were blown up. My sister's back was blown up. Her leg was blown off. They were unidentifiable. They were already partially cremated. They only went out to meet friends and family. They
were doing a normal, perfectly normal activity.
They were doing what any young person wanted to do.
Yeah.
And she was handing out invitations that night because she was going to have a housewarming party that we were going to. I was only 11 and my sister Jane was 13, and Mum was going to allow us to go because she trusted Maxine because she was very sensible. But Maxine did nothing wrong to anybody. The other 20 did nothing wrong to anybody. Two of the youngest lads to be killed, Paul Anthony Davis and Neil Tommy Marsh. Neil Tommy Marsh was only 16. They were both of West Indian descent. They were only walking past the pub. Yeah. And they were killed by flying glass, and they were treated abominably.
Julie, I think you've been treated abominably. I think so many people have, and I think this is something that is very different from what it was meant to be in the first place. Julie, I thank you for your honesty, and I thank you for speaking so clearly today. It's heartbreaking, Candice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just briefly.
Yeah, I feel so emotional listening to her. There is still so much unresolved trauma. You know, there can be a huge...
And it's not going to be resolved because this bill is going to deny people justice, I think.
Yes.
Unfortunately. And that is what the government has done. Listen, thank you, Candice. Thank you to Julie for speaking so clearly on that. We're going to return to the issue of the prison escape as well.